Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Thomas Koulopoulos, though he goes by the name of TK. TK and I are going to talk about Giga Trends. What are they? How it's going to impact us. So TK, where can people find you?
They can find me at tkspeaks.com. All of my different properties are somehow linked to that, but they can see a lot of my videos there. They can link to my virtual persona where they can have a conversation with me in real time. Sometimes it's more articulate than the version that you'll get here, Tim. So, but that's where folks can find me, tkspeaks.com.
So you've got a book coming out called Giga Trends, or is it out already?
So the second edition, it's been out for a year. The second edition just came out last week, and we updated it because so much was happening in the field of AI. The book already looked at AI, but so much has changed in the last year. I think it surprised everyone. So we felt we had to update it to bring it up to speed, not just on where AI is today, but where we see it going over the next 10 to 20 years. So second edition is out now.
Okay. And in terms of Giga Trends, you see these as basically forces that are going to impact on us. So why don't you take us through what those things are?
So Giga Trends are forces that, as the name implies, will impact the lives of 1 billion or more people. We wanted to find trends that were foundational, they were cornerstones of the future. So we looked at things like the demographic shifts, which are pretty much immutable. The reality is that the world is going to change as far as the population pyramid goes, and we can talk a bit more about that in dramatic ways that we haven't seen for the last 5,000 years.
And is that to do with the fact that we're having less children and we've got an aging population?
So there were a couple of factors here. It certainly does have to do with the fact that the replacement rate is not on par with what we need to continue growing the population. And in many areas, it's reducing the population. So China, for example, China by 2100 will have half of the population it has today. A lot of that is because of policy. A lot of that is because of the one child per family policy. But there are also other dynamics at play here. It's not just the replacement rate. It also has to do with the carrying capacity of the planet. What we don't often talk about is that, let's say generously, 2 billion of the 8 billion people on the planet today live on what we would consider to be well below the poverty level. 4 billion live on less than $7 a day. So there's a carrying capacity to the planet, and what we can do with the industrial models that we've created to help feed those folks, to clothe them, to provide them sanitation and healthcare. So my sense is that what we're going to see is a shift to bringing the other 4 billion, as we call them in the book, online. And that's going to occupy a lot of resource, a lot of time, and require some novel new ways that frankly aren't the economies of scale that we built during the industrial era. So because of those reasons, we're reaching a plateau. And most people believe, demographers who plot these things believe that we'll hit about 10 billion people, because some areas are still growing. The African continent is still growing in terms of population. Some of the Middle East is still growing in terms of population. So we'll peak at about 10 billion, and that is what's called the carrying capacity of the planet. And I do believe that we're not going to get beyond that. So it won't be just about growth anymore. It'll be about creating an economic engine that does bring the entire population of the world into the economic mainstream. I know that sounds ambitious, but I think that will be the task of the next 100 years.
So what other giga trends have you got?
So I just mentioned healthcare. Healthcare is the second giga trend we talk about. The reality is, to them, if I look at population around the world and healthcare around the world, I just came back from Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the Emirates. The reality is that there's not a healthcare system on the face of the planet that will survive this demographic shift we were just talking about. We won't be able to fund healthcare to address the complexity of the new comorbidities, this aging population, new therapies, new pharmaceuticals. So we look at healthcare and what we call ambient care, which is the move to healthcare that follows me wherever I go. So healthcare is not just what I get in the clinic. It's not just what I get when I go to the doctor's office. Healthcare should be with me 24/7. I should have healthcare at my disposal through biometrics and wearables that is constantly tracking me and then intervening to avoid illness, not just to treat illness, but to avoid it, to keep me healthy and to increase my health span. That should be the objective of healthcare. So we look very deeply at how ambient care is going to become increasingly part of the landscape of the future. And again, not just for the 4 billion that are fortunate enough to have access to care, but for the 4 billion that don't have access to care today. We need to provide them with health care as well. And that's going to be quite a task, but it's going to require moving out of the clinical setting, the hospital setting, and delivering healthcare wherever the individual happens to be. The third gigatrend, and the one that most people are fascinated with, is the future of work. And this is where AI begins to play a really interesting role. We talk about digital workers. I spend, and I'm not being hyperbolic here because I'm fascinated by the degree to which this has taken over my life. I will spend at least 3 hours a day conversing, interacting, providing tasks to various AI agents that I use. Right now, while we're speaking, I have an AI agent, manus.im, creating several projects for me in the background for several clients that I'm working with. These digital workers are going to quickly replace a lot of entry-level positions, and that creates some serious economic fallout because every university graduate begins, let's say 90% of them plus begin at entry-level positions. They don't begin by being leaders. They don't begin by entering the organization 2 or 3 or 4 rungs up the ladder. So what happens to all the university graduates that suddenly don't have entry-level positions in finance, in accounting, in marketing, in the creative disciplines? It'll be an interesting time, I think, over the course of the next 20, 30 years as we go through this transition and digital workers do so much of the work that we do. However, I'm hopeful, and I want to make sure I make this point and make it clear. I do think long-term, digital workers will allow us to do more of what we do well as humans, to be the orchestrators, the architects of the future. And I use a trite analogy here, but it's one that is near and dear to my heart, especially here in the States. We used to have what were called toll takers, folks that would, take your money as you went through a toll booth on the highway. And every time I went through one of those toll booths, I thought to myself, my God, what a waste of a magnificent human being. I wasn't saying that in a disparaging way. I just felt there was much more capacity that we have as humans than to just, take a quarter or a dollar bill from someone going through a toll. Here's the issue. AI, however, is going to happen much faster than any of these past transitions have. So the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, these took not just decades, but hundreds of years to displace workers. So we could retrain, we could upskill, we could graduate more folks from university to do more knowledge work. What happens when this occurs over the course of 2 or 3 decades, not 100 or 200 years? That's going to be the challenge, and that will be one of the biggest challenges I think we face. And we talk about this in the book, how we'll cope with this, universal basic income, some of these other mechanisms. But I think it will be an incredible challenge for us as a society, certainly in the developed world, where we value the knowledge worker with such high esteem. It's going to be interesting.
I think there's already been some research out over the last couple of weeks about entry-level jobs disappearing.
Yes.
And so it's a reality, isn't it? Rather than we're not looking in the future; it's actually happening now.
No, it's happening now. This is. I keep telling people we will see more change in the next 10 years than we've seen in the last 100. I grew up, my grandmother, God bless her, lived to be over 100 years old. And I used to say to myself, Tim, because I loved her dearly, I spent a lot of time with her, I'll never see as much change as she did, from the Wright brothers to a man on the moon. I've doubted that now for some time. I think that you and I will see much more change over the next 10 years than we've seen over the last 100. It'll come at us that quickly. So this isn't the future. This is the present that we're talking about. And we have to take action now to be able to avoid some of the repercussions of these very dramatic and drastic changes, the economic issues that we're going to have to face, not just the human issues, but the economic issues as well.
Any more mega trends that you pick up?
Oh, yes. So real quick, transportation, autonomous vehicles. I know that we disparage and we poo-poo the notion of autonomous cars and so on and so forth, but the reality is that within 10 years time, certainly 20 at the outset, depending on where you are on the planet, because regulation is an issue here. Unions will be an issue with commercial trucking. But the reality is that the economics of autonomous vehicles will be just much too attractive. These vehicles will own themselves on the blockchain. They'll maintain themselves. The idea of personally owned automobiles will be ridiculous unless you're owning an antique to have as a, you know, as a toy, as a plaything in your garage. Insurers won't want to insure human beings. It will be too risky. We're much too dangerous behind the wheel of a car. Our children's children, I'm sure, will look back on us and say, you know, Grandpa, what did you do? You put my dad, my mom behind the wheel of a car at 16 years old. Were you crazy to do that? That's how much the world will change. So autonomous vehicles, identity, you know, my identity, your identity today is based on paper and plastic. I have my license here of my, you know, official hologram on it. This will be ridiculous. We talk about how identity will also end up being this immutable digital asset that we own. And finally, we talk about what we call hyper dematerialization, how more and more value is now in digital form and not in physical form. And that sounds odd because a lot of assets, gold is a wonderful example, are still physical assets. They're not going to go away, but increasingly digital assets will occupy more and more the asset base of the world and my personal asset base. And to give you a quick anecdote here, I already am planning for this, and I see many of us doing this. I will leave my digital persona, my digital assets to my children. I will include it in a trust or in my will, and I will bequeath it to them. And it will be a very valuable asset for them because they'll be able to use that in ways to provide for their own economic security going forward. And at the worst case, they'll be able to hear a good dad joke every now and then from my virtual self after I'm long gone.
So is that all of the mega trends that you've done now?
That's all of them. That's all the giga trends that we've talked about. There are others that weave in and out of this. So climate change is obviously part of this, and we talk about energy when we talk about hyper dematerialization. So we do weave some of the other trends that people have top of mind, like sustainability, climate change, into these. But we believe that they're secondary, believe it or not, because these primary gigatrends are the ones that ultimately are going to drive all of the other gigatrends we talk about. I'll give you an example. If we try to use the industrial engines we've built over the past 200 years to serve the other 4 billion, we'll choke the planet. Climate change will accelerate at an incredible pace. So we have to alter the models with which we deliver services and products to the other 4 billion. And that serves to create a more sustainable economy and planet. So there are other trends that people will probably put into this bucket of giga trends, and we haven't covered all of them certainly, but we think the ones that we have covered are the driving forces in that will be most shaping the future.
So we were talking before we came live about artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And our own use of artificial intelligence, and the way it was changing the way that we were thinking. Because I saw some research today from MIT about the way it was, the way it was. So, some people say we're not thinking anymore.
Right.
And then we had the discussion, and I'm going to reach for it, about the change that happened when, this is my calculator from school.
Yes.
How when you and I were growing up, our teachers were aghast that we were thinking of using calculating machines rather than using our heads to add up.
Right.
And so there is this kind of, we're kind of seeing this thing again. What do you see happening with AI? And you're a big user of AI. What do you see? How's your thought process changing?
So let me provide you with a simple observation that I've been sharing lately. AI will make the lazy thinkers lazier and the ambitious thinkers more ambitious. For someone in my demographic or in your demographic, for someone, let's say, above the age of 30 or 40, I think that applies. That's eminently valuable to understand. If you're lazy, this will give you more excuses to be lazy, to procrastinate, to put off doing work, to put off doing creative thinking. If you're ambitious, this will be like steroids for your ambition. It will make you hyper ambitious. My concern is for those in the younger demographic, for Gen Z, for millennials, for Gen Alpha, certainly. What will it do to them? I can only look back to my own experience. And to your point about the calculator, the reason I brought the calculator to class was because I couldn't do my multiplication tables. And still to this day, I will admit it without shame, I've finally been able to shake the burden of sharing this. My multiplications tables are awful, but I love mathematics. I absorb it like a sponge. If I didn't have that calculator, I would have hit a brick wall because I couldn't do my multiplication tables. I never would have gotten any further. But because I had the calculator, I was able to explore greater dimensions of mathematics that were not only gratifying to me, but I think helped me as a person to develop and to evolve. I do think that's the role that AI can play. AI can help us to flourish in those things that from which we get the greatest passion and in which we have the greatest interest. But we have to use it as a facilitator, as a collaborator, not as a replacement for our thinking. That has to be taught. You know, today we teach students how to use computers and how to do things with computers to enhance their lives. We're not doing enough of that with AI. We have to show them how to use AI, that AI is a collaborator, that you are the architect, you are the creative force, and AI is going to be the means by which you accelerate and amplify that. If we take that path, and I believe we will over time, but we're not so much today, then I think AI fills a very valuable role and it accelerates our ambition. But don't make any mistake about it. The lazy will always be lazy. I've taught at university level for many years now. You can pick the ones that are going to be ambitious and the ones that are going to take the shortcuts. It is human nature. AI will only amplify both ends of that spectrum.
Do you think that we're going to start having some sort of digital consciousness?
I think we already do in many ways. Richard Feynman had a wonderful quote. I was listening to some video of him recently, where he said, "Look, AI won't think the way that we do, won't be conscious the way that we are, but it will be able to have conversations with us that give us the impression that it is thinking in the way that we're thinking." And the reason for that, and not to be trivial here, but when you talk to your dog, you don't talk to it in complete sentences. I do sometimes, but most times, I tell it to sit, to come, to do this, to do that. AI will similarly treat us, speak to us in ways that we understand. It doesn't mean it's thinking in the way that we're thinking. It means that it will have to do that in order to cause us to understand what it wants from us and what we want from it. So the conversation with AI will lead us to believe that it's conscious. And frankly, that's all that really matters. Is it sentient? Is it conscious? Are we all tied into some quantum realm that we don't? I don't know is the answer to that. But it will certainly appear to be conscious. It will appear to be a thinking, rational entity. And to that degree, it can help us to have conversations that are more meaningful, because that is the way that we relate one to another as humans. What is it really thinking? How does it think? I'm not sure that even matters any more than I understand what's going on behind this piece of glass right now as I talk to you with the millions and millions of integrated circuits and transistors that are firing. I don't know what's going on there. Not really sure what's going on up here either. But I know it works. I know we're having a conversation, and I know that it's meaningful, and something is coming out of it. And that's really all that matters at the end of the day when I talk with AI and collaborate with it.
Is there a way that we can use Giga Trends in our business strategy?
I believe
future-proof our business strategy.
Well, thank you. You took the words right out of my mouth. It's to future-proof it, not to future-proof it by predicting the future. And we're careful, although we make some assumptions, some predictions in the book about every one of the Giga Trends, and we try to do it over the course of the next 8 decades as we move to 2100. The reality is that there are far too many variables to fully predict the future. What we can do is build the resilience that we need to survive whatever scenario comes at us. And that was the purpose of the book, is to give you a landscape that enables you to understand what the various ways that the future might evolve will be, and how they will impact you as an individual, us as a society, our economy, and our organization. So I think the book is filled with information that helps you to better understand how to navigate all of these potential futures. And there are many of them. And none of us know exactly which one will shape the path going forward, but we all have to be constantly, I think, evaluating that roadmap reassessing it, and making the case that the future is by necessity unknown and highly uncertain, but we still have to survive it nonetheless.
A VP that I work for, he said that in leadership, it was all about having no surprises.
Mm,
And I think that by understanding about the gigatrends and educating yourself,
right.
I agree with you. You can't necessarily predict the future, but at least you're not going to be surprised.
Exactly. And well, there will always be some surprises. I think the nature of our world today is that there's always going to be something that comes at you out of left field. But the more intensely you study the alternatives and look at the possibilities, the more likely you are going to be to survive even those surprises. Resiliency is like a muscle. You know, we build strength. We don't know exactly how we'll need that strength or where we'll need it, but it serves us in ways that we can both anticipate and that we can't. Resilience is a muscle like any other muscle. And to build it, you have to constantly, in a disciplined way, be looking at, evaluating, and understanding the various ways the future might evolve. And that's what we try to do in the book, is give you as broad a landscape as possible to look at those futures, those potential futures, and then to ask, are we prepared for that? As crazy as it might be, are we prepared for that future? And there's a lot of scenario-based planning that I do with organizations. And it's amazing, Tim, how narrow sometimes their view of the future is, and how likely their scenarios are. Look at the pandemic, not a likely scenario. So we have to, when we look at the future, we have to plan for those things that are outliers, for those things that are unreasonable, and ask the question, can we also survive those scenarios?
TK, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a fascinating. Been really looking forward to. So have you got a book you can hold up there, or?
You know what? I shouldn't I? Do I have I have the I don't have the latest cover of the book. This is
Okay.
the second edition has an entirely new cover that we pulled together. It's on Amazon, which is where everyone buys their books these days, obviously. And you can also go to gigatrends.io to find out more about the book, listen to some audio clips, check out an excerpt of the bonus chapter that we just included on the future of AI as well.
Okay. And where can we find information about you, TK?
tkspeaks.com is where you can find all the information about me. And yes, go ahead and have a chat with my virtual self and ask it the same questions and see if it comes up with the same answers.
That would be interesting, yes. TK, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book and talking about